On the Buzz Meter this Sunday, it was just a local scandal involving bridge traffic until a newspaper dug up evidence that Christie's aides deliberately caused a traffic nightmare in New Jersey as an act of political retaliation. Suddenly, at least according to the media, his presidential hopes for 2016 were practically roadkill. And the story prompted Christie to hold a marathon news conference, sparring with reporters for nearly 2 hours.
I am embarrassed and humiliated by the conduct of some of the people on my team. I am who I am, but I am not a bully. I'm sad. I'm sad. That's the predominant emotion I feel right now, is sadness. Listen, I have absolutely nothing to hide. That's a crazy question, man.
The question now, are the media doing a drive-by on the governor? The book is a bombshell, but is it also a betrayal? Robert Gates ripping Barack Obama over war policy, in part by recounting private conversations with the president and Hillary Clinton. Should the former Pentagon chief be cashing in with a tell-all? The media's full-court press over Dennis Rodman and his North Korea exploits after he loses it in a CNN interview. Why exactly should we care? Plus, magazines still photoshopping anorexic models, and now there's proof of how it influences young women. Does this need to stop? I'm Howard Kurtz, and this is Media Buzz. Most scandals are complicated. The saga of Christie and the George Washington Bridge, not so much. New Jersey's Bergen Record obtained emails showing that, contrary to earlier denials, some of the governor's aides relished the traffic nightmare caused by closing 2 access lanes to the bridge, creating a nightmare for Fort Lee, New Jersey, whose Democratic mayor had the gall to refuse to back Christie for re-election. Christie had dismissed the emerging scandal as so much media hype, but then came the emails, with one Christie aide writing, "Time for some traffic problems in Fort Lee," and a text message to a Christie appointee saying, "Is it wrong that I am smiling?" This caused a media firestorm, many pundits casting doubt on Christie's 2016 hopes and pumping up the scandal.
Governor Chris Christie ran into a traffic jam today on the road to the White House.
Good evening. The governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, said today he is angry, he's embarrassed, he's humiliated, but he's innocent.
It reinforces a negative stereotype that you and I both know has been out there for years about him, that he's just a bully at heart.
If an email pops up with Christie's name on it, copied, CC'd, sent, returned, replied, he's dead man walking politically.
Joining us now, Lauren Ashburn, Fox News contributor and author of the top Twitter Talk column on the Fox website. Britt Hume, Fox News analyst and the network's former Washington managing editor. And Dana Milbank, columnist for the Washington Post. That press conference, more than 19,000 words were spoken.
108 minutes.
How did Christie handle reporters during this marathon that went on until none of us could take it anymore and had to race to the bathroom?
Right, or lunch, to be not so crude, Howie. 108 minutes was his biggest downfall. That was the problem. Reporters can't hold on for that long to information. However, what he did right was that I think he slapped reporters around.
Not like he usually does. He didn't call anybody an idiot.
But I think that they like that when he was very firm with them. And then he was also contrite. There is nothing more that the media loves than to bring a politician way down.
He was sad. He said he was sad.
No,
he said he was sad many times.
To like bury him, to say this guy's done, he's toast, and then to build him back up again.
Well, we're not in that next phase. Britt Hume, Christie's a guy who loves to spar with reporters, but here he kind of had to be restrained and not. We didn't see the full Chris Christie on display.
Well, when you come out and announce that you're humiliated, it's pretty hard to get from there to being the bully boy again, if that's what people think he is. It all depends, the outcome of this, and in the end, the coverage, the extent of the coverage of it, length of it.
What about the fact
on one
that,
thing?
Yeah.
Did he tell the truth? Did he tell the truth about what he knew or what involvement he had? He said he had none and he didn't know. If anything surfaces to contradict that, that will further the story. And if it turns out to be an unassailable fact that he did know, then his national political career is over.
I would say, Dana Milbank, anytime you have to come out and say, I am not a bully, it's not a great day for a politician. But at the same time, Christie had been blaming the press for what he thought was a nothing story. Turns out the press was right.
The press was right, and even in his disgrace and humiliation, he still managed to make a pretty good case for himself. Of those 19,000 words, I counted 680 of them were the word I, and many others were me and myself.
Is that actually a scientific analysis?
Well, we used, you know, the Word documents and did a little search.
Right.
So it may
well, that
not
was
be
the criticism
right.
that it was too self-absorbed.
Well, that's what I was saying. Even in sort of defeat like this, that he felt a certain self-absorption. Now, we were on this very show 2 months ago. We talked about the media swooning over Chris Christie, and that's what I think was happening this year. We were building him up, and now it's like, okay, now's the chance to take the guy down.
You have so expertly set me up for my next question, which is, Christie was the press's favorite Republican. I think a lot of journalists, particularly on the East Coast, liked his sort of pragmatic Republican approach to conservative politics and his personality, and he's great copy and all of that. And now that seems to be changing. Everybody is savaging the
Golden boy to piñata and punching bag, which is what, as I said earlier, people love to see. They love to see politicians getting it and getting whacked. But here's the other thing, is that the same things that people loved about Chris Christie earlier is what they hate now. So he was brash. He was a Jersey Shore kind of guy, you know, forget about it. But then...
Get off the beach.
Get off the beach. But then when he starts doing that in this scenario, it's a liability.
And on that point, Britt, we now have all these stories popping up about, is he a bully? New York Times story is add up as bully image trails Christie. Well, LA Times, scandal only underscores his bully image. And there were stories about an ex-governor who was stripped of security and a senator who had a program canceled. And all these videos that you talk about, what used to be sort of Christie Unplugged, now being cited as evidence of a guy who maybe has a temperament problem. Let's put up just one of Christie's greatest hits.
And let me tell you something. After you graduate from law school, you conduct yourself like that in a courtroom, your rear end's going to get thrown in jail, idiot.
That was an ex-Navy SEAL who had challenged him at a town hall. So what about this bully narrative?
Well, I would have to say that in this sort of feminized atmosphere in which we exist today, guys who were masculine and muscular like that in their private conduct and kind of old-fashioned tough guys run some risks.
Feminized?
Feminized.
Atmosphere.
By which you mean?
By which I mean that men today have learned the lesson the hard way, that if you act like a kind of an old-fashioned guy's guy, you're in constant danger of slipping out and saying something that's going to get you in trouble and make you look like a sexist or make you look like you seem thuggish or whatever. That's the atmosphere in which he operated. This guy's very much an old-fashioned, masculine, muscular guy, and there are political risks associated with that. Maybe it shouldn't be, but that's how it is.
Well, we're so used to blow-dried candidates right now, and who don't say anything that is outside of what should be political speak. And they've got their hair perfect, and, you know, if you think about Mitt Romney, the image was so carefully crafted.
And they lose weight whenever it's re-election time. And Christie obviously is a big guy who has also lost weight. Now, let's talk about how much is too much, because there's starting to be a lot of chatter about that, Dana. On Wednesday, the day that those emails surfaced, but the day before the news conference that went on forever, MSNBC, it seemed to me, was covering the story every 8 minutes. CNN did a lot. Fox News did very little that first day. What's your take on it?
Well, I think it follows the usual pattern. Somebody did a tally of it. It was like 2 hours and 40 minutes on MSNBC, 2 hours and 20 minutes on CNN, and 14 minutes on Fox. So I think Fox realized it had underdone things a bit and then built it up the next day. But when these things happen in reverse, when it's a Democrat on the receiving end of this, you're going to see maybe not that lopsided, but you're going to see basically the mirror image of that occurring.
One Fox commentator wrote, Todd Starnes, wrote, mainstream media hyperventilating over a traffic jam.
Listen, that's dead wrong, and this is why. That's a traffic jam, but that's no ordinary traffic jam, and that's no ordinary bridge. In fact, it was an on-ramp, but that's beside the point. When you start thinking about the number of people in this country who have traversed that bridge, it's the busiest in the world. It's part of the major north-south traffic artery of the entire East Coast. and literally millions of Americans who have never lived anywhere near New York or New Jersey or Connecticut have been over that bridge. They remember it because it's so unpleasant even on the best day. And people read about this and they can remember the bridge and they can picture themselves stuck in a traffic jam there because much of the time there is a traffic jam on the best days there.
And of course,
my view of this is that this is something that a little bit like the IRS scandal for President Obama, people can feel it, they can imagine it, and they can feel it. If it doesn't affect them, they can imagine it affecting them.
And of course, there were those callous emails in the midst of all this. Now, I worked for the Bergen Record in Hackensack eons ago, the paper that broke the story, and I covered the Port Authority at one point. It was always
a century ago?
Maybe half a century, and it was always been a kind of a patronage haven. But it turns out it was old-fashioned newspaper digging that cracked this story open.
The Bergen Record gets the commendation of the year for this story. They started in September covering the actual traffic jam, at which point Chris Christie had this to say: it's not that big a deal just because the press runs around and writes about it, both here and nationally. I know why that is, and so do you.
He said that as recently as December.
Right. That's right. And in between all of this, the Port Authority chief stonewalled. First he said he was going to say something, then he said he wasn't going to say something, he wouldn't address it. Then Christie blamed the Democrats in the beginning of December. Then the Port Authority chair was silent, and then we have this. And really, it goes to Sean Boberg, who has covered the Port Authority since 2011, for sticking with this story and continuing to push.
You mentioned if it's a Democrat, if it's a Republican. I'm hearing a lot of chatter about, well, what about the various Obama scandals? And somehow that the press's interest in this story, which, you know, wasn't really that much of a national story until these emails this week made it explode. And Christie himself, let's face it, by holding that entertaining 2-hour extravaganza, provided a lot of visuals for television to replay again and again and again. But is it fair to say, well, the IRS scandal should have gotten more coverage as opposed to this?
Look, the press loves a scandal, and I think the love of scandal is even greater than any sort of an ideological division there. But I think Britt hit it exactly right in terms of why people can understand the whole waiting in traffic thing. They could understand the IRS thing. They can understand the website problem. But, you know, take something like Benghazi. That's complicated, and I think it's harder for people to grasp it, and therefore less appealing for the press to follow it.
Right. This is not a hard scandal to understand. The only question, Britt, as you say, is what did the governor know and when did he know it? And maybe he didn't know any of it, but then you get into the press saying, was, just very briefly, did he create a culture in his office?
That's right. And this is one of these, this is a sort of a new feature of our political landscape in which politicians are not only responsible for the things that they have done and they've ordered done, but they're also responsible for these more amorphous things called climates and cultures and atmospheres, for which they are also in some respect held responsible. So you can nail somebody even if they didn't actually do anything, if you can establish to the satisfaction of enough people that they created a culture and a climate and an atmosphere.
The buck stops at the top. Let me get a break. Send me a tweet about our show during this hour, at Howard Kurtz. We'll read some of them at the end of the program. When we come back, did Robert Gates disclose vital information about President Obama or betray his ex-boss with that tell-all memoir? And later, new research about how photoshopping ultra-thin models actually hurts younger women.